Registrations are now open for our ACCA Performance Management exam course. Get access to our comprehensive playlist of over 46 hours of content, including concept videos covering the entire syllabus, exam videos explaining how those concepts are tested in the exam, and question videos to help you with exam practice. Subscribe to one of our packages. The smallest package, for $10, you get access to the entire course for 7 days, or you can subscribe to one of our longer term packages. For more information, check out the links in the description below. And now, on to the video. Hello everyone, and how are you all doing today? So today we'll be doing yet another question for the ACCA Performance Management exam. And the question we're doing today is from the December 2020 exam. It's scenario number 1. The question is for a company called Health Nuts, and it basically focuses mostly on CVP, or cost volume profit analysis, and the formulas such as break even, margin of safety, the weighted average CS ratio, and so on. So as always, we'll start by reading the requirement. So the first requirement for part A is broken down into 2 parts, and it says calculate both the number of customers Health Nuts needs to break even and the margin of safety as a percentage for the month of June for part 1, the gym, and part 2, the cafe. 3 marks for the gym calculations and 2 marks for the cafe calculations. So let's break down our requirement. For each of the gym and the cafe, we need to calculate the number of customers to break even, which is basically we'll be using the formula for break even number of units, which is fixed cost over contribution per unit, and the margin of safety as a percentage, which is of course your budgeted number of units minus your break even number of units, which we will calculate separately, over your budgeted number of units for the month of June. So when it comes to the examiner report, the examiner has said that students struggled with the calculations in this question and on how to present them, because there was a lot of information in the case and students got confused. So we're going to focus on making our presentation easy to understand, as well as understanding how to perform these calculations. So the first thing we'll do obviously is we'll label our question. So we're going to label our parts. This is going to be part A, and parts 1 and 2 we're going to do them one after another, or we can do them together, right? So we'll just say part 1 for the cafe over here, and then we'll copy the format down below for part 2. Now we'll keep this column separate and we'll make it bold so that it's distinguished from the rest of the answer. So we need 2 calculations, the break-even number of units and the margin of safety as a percentage. So we'll write down our formula, what we need over here, so that when we go through the case, we'll just fill out the numbers. So the formula for break-even number of units is our fixed cost over our contribution per unit, or in this case, it's the number of customers, which are the number of units, so contribution per customer, and this will give us the break-even number of customers. So if we stretch this out, this will be equal to the fixed cost divided by the contribution per customer. And we'll also need to calculate the margin of safety as a percentage. For that, we'll need the budgeted number of customers, and our margin of safety as a percentage will be the budgeted number of customers minus the break-even number of customers divided by the budgeted number of customers, right? So this is what our calculation will be for both the cafe and the gym. So we'll label our parts over here. So part A, the first one is going to be for the gym, so we can put a heading there, and part 2 we'll just copy all of this that we have over here. This is gonna be for our cafe, and this is going to be part 2. You'll notice that the software we're using is slightly different because I just wanted to highlight that Microsoft Excel, though it's the most popularly used spreadsheet software out there, it's not the only one. So I'm using a different spreadsheet software, which is LibreOffice, and it's a free software which you can download online, but it's just to demonstrate that there are other spreadsheet softwares out there apart from Microsoft Excel, because the ACCA is focusing a lot on the computer-based exam part and knowing about spreadsheet softwares, word processing softwares as well. So LibreOffice has all the different variations, just like Microsoft Word, Excel, etc., right? And they have more or less all the same features. It's just the whole graphics are a bit different, as you can see. Anyway, so 5 marks for these calculations. Let's go through the case scenario. So it says Health Nuts is a fitness center offering pay-as-you-go gym facilities. It has a fully fitted gym with the capacity to accommodate 200 users at one time. It also has 100 car parking spaces and an on-site cafe, both of which are only for customers using the gym. So a lot of this is just fluff. The fitness center has shower facilities. Yeah, that's fine. It is open for 360 days a year. This might become relevant later on, from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Customers pay $8.4 for access to the gym for 1 hour plus unlimited time in the cafe. If customers want to use the car park, they have to pay an additional $1 per visit, and 80% of the visiting customers use the car park. Okay, fair enough. So this will give us our revenue per customer, which we'll need to find the contribution per customer. Health Nuts has been monitoring the number of customers attending throughout each day for the month of June, which has to be considered an average month. So remember, our requirement said it's for the month of June, so this is relevant, for which Health Nuts was open for 30 days, okay, and it has determined that the average number of customers per day is 330, with 40 of these customers attending during 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So they've mentioned this time here. We'll see if that becomes relevant. It won't be relevant for this part, but it might become relevant for a subsequent part. The total cost of the fitness center for June, excluding the cafe, have been recorded as follows. Fixed costs were $48,000 and variable cost per customer is 1.2. So we have the fixed cost, which is $48,000 for the month of June. So we'll just fill this out over here. And we have the variable cost per customer, which along with the revenue can be used to find the contribution per customer. And what does it say after that? It says on average, half of the customers also use the cafe in June with an average spend of 2.2. So this is basically information for the cafe. So first let's just complete the calculation for the gym. We have our fixed cost. Variable cost per customer is $1.2. And what is the revenue? It's going to be $8.4 to access the gym and $1 for parking, which 80% of customers use. So our total revenue will be the $8.4 plus $1 into 80%, because only 80% of customers will be paying that $1. That's our total revenue minus the variable cost per customer of 1.2 will give us the contribution per customer, which is $8, and we get 6,000 over here. And that gives us a break-even number of customers basically. And let's just format our numbers. So in order to format our numbers, we just need to select format up here. We have number format. We'll make this into numbers to 2 decimal places, that's fine. And this will make a percentage, so format, number format as a percentage. And let's just copy this as is so that the format is copied as well. Okay, and we'll fill out these cells again. Okay, so certain differences in the software, but otherwise it's very similar to Excel. Anyway, so for the cafe, what did it say? On average, half of the customers will use the cafe in June. So the budgeted number of customers is going to be half of what the overall customers will be, because remember, only people who access the gym have access to the cafe. So this is going to be $4,950. It says the average customer spend will be $2.2. Of this, 60% is related to drinks, which have a profit margin of 60%, and the remaining is related to food items which have a profit margin of 40%, the remaining 40%. So 60% of 2.2 is related to drinks, and on that the profit margin is 60%, which we'll need for our contribution. The remaining 40% is on food items, for which the profit margin is 40%, and the specific fixed costs for the cafe are 3,600 per month. So 3,600 per month, and the contribution is going to be 2.2 into 60% for the drinks multiplied by the 60% for the margin, plus 2.2 into the 40% for the food into 40% profit margin. So that gives us around 1.14 something. So if we divide 3,600 by 1.14, the break-even number of customers is 3,147, and because we copied all the formula down here, we got our margin of safety at 36.43%. So we took a bit of time initially to plug in our formulas, but thanks to that, we just had to plug in the numbers and immediately we got our answers. Okay, so that does part A. Let's move on to part B. Part B says, explain what each of your calculations in A tells health nuts about the performance of the gym and the cafe, just for 3 marks. So we just need to explain what we're dealing with over here. So let's go back to our Excel sheet, or rather spreadsheet. So what was included in our calculations? There was a break even and there was a margin of safety percentage. That's what we need to talk about for 3 marks. So we'll start with a break even. Our calculations indicate that in order for the gym and cafe to recover all of their respective fixed costs, they need to have at least, so break-even number customers for the gym is 6,000 and 3,147 approximately for the cafe. 3,147 customers respectively for the month of June, because remember, what is break even? When your profit is 0 and effectively you've covered all your fixed costs. This will lead to a situation where their profit is 0 and any additional customers will now generate profits. And then we can talk about the margin of safety. The margin of safety percentages of 39% and 36% for the gym and cafe respectively indicate that based on the expected number of customers, both the gym and the cafe are in a profit making position, right? Because they have a large margin of safety percentage. Even if their customers fall by over 30%, the company will still be in a profit making position. Okay, it's just for 3 marks, so we don't need to dwell too much on it, because the examiner did say that students were struggling with managing their time due to the high number of requirements. So let's just move on. Part C, calculate the budgeted total weighted average CS ratio. Now students get confused with this calculation. The formula for weighted average CS ratio is very simple. Total contribution over total sales. What do we mean by total contribution and total sales? Well, weighted average CS ratio will usually apply across multiple products or whatever. So we'll have to add up the contribution and sales of all those different products. or in this case, whatever, the cafe and everything. And the budgeted profit per month. So break the requirement down. The weighted average CS ratio is just one part of the requirement. Apart from that, we also need to calculate the budgeted profit per month for Health Nuts if it closes the cafe and opens a creche instead for 6 marks. So what do we need to do? We need to assume the cafe is closed, that they open a creche, so the gym is still open and there's a creche. And for that situation, we need to calculate one, the weighted average CS ratio, which would be the total contribution for the gym and the creche over the total sales for the gym and the creche, and the budgeted profit for the month as well. Okay, so in this case, let's label part C. We're gonna need the total contribution for the gym and the creche. So what we can do is, once again, we'll put our labels, gym, and we'll have our, since we need both the total revenue and the total contribution, we'll have a calculation for that. Total revenue, total contribution, and then let's format as we go along. So let's go up and see what they say about the creche. So they say creche proposal. After reviewing all of the above information, the manager of Health Nuts has put together their proposal to close the cafe at the fitness center and convert it into a creche for children. This would mean parents would leave their children in the creche while they use the fitness center between the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. only. Now, they told us above 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. that out of the 330 customers per day, 40 attend during 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So this would probably apply to them. The charge for the creche would be $4 per child per hour. Once again, we're assuming that customers visit for 1 hour, because in our calculation that they gave us, it's $8.4 to calculate for 1 hour for the gym, right? It says initial research suggests that the customers have an average of 2 children each. So we need to be careful. This is something students easily overlook, because 2 is given as a word rather than a number. And sometimes students overlook they're just looking for the numbers in the scenario, not for any words. So please be careful. So it's 2 children per customer. The creche is expected to attract new customers and increase the average number of customers between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. by 300%. So this existing 40 will increase by a further 300%, or by 3 times. So 300% of 40 is 120. So initial 40 plus 120 new customers, or 160 customers in total. Only these new customers will use the creche facilities. So for the creche, it's only going to be the 120 new extra customers. Car park usage is expected to continue to be 80%. Fixed costs associated with running the creche are $8,000 with a variable cost of 0.5 per child per hour. So we can add the situation for the customers as well as for the variable cost over here. So let's just insert a row above, number of customers. So it's gonna be the 330 plus there's gonna be 300% more of the creche customers, the 40. Remember, the 40 is already included in 330, so we don't need to add that again. So we just have to add the extra 300% of 40. So 450 customers, and the total revenue for those 450 customers will be multiplied by the 8.4 admission fee multiplied by plus 1 into 80% for the parking fee, right? So our total revenue will be 4,140 for these 450 customers for the month. And total contribution, let's include a separate row for total variable cost. We do not have to, we can just calculate total contribution directly, but you know, just for formatting purposes. We'll make the total revenue and the total contribution bold, as that will be used in our calculation for the weighted average CS ratio. So the total variable cost will be minus the number of customers into, once again, it was 1.2 per customer for the gym. So 540, and that means that the total sum would be for numbers 38 and 39. Okay, 3,600 contribution and 4,140 revenue for the gym. We'll need to add this to the information for the creche. So we'll copy paste this now that we have the format down below for the creche. For the creche, the number of customers will just be the additional 120, or we will take this formula and remove the original 330 because only the new customers will be using the creche. So this will be 120. Furthermore, in our revenue formula, we will need to change the revenue. It's only going to be, they mentioned it over here, that $4 per child per hour, but there are 2 children, right? So number of customers, we'll have to multiply this by 2. So it'll be 240, and that will be 4 per child. So this multiplied by 4 gives us 960, and the total variable cost will be $0.5 per child. So this will be 0.5. So 240 into 0.5 will give us 120, and our contribution will be 840. So our weighted average CS ratio for the creche and the gym combined will be total contribution for both these, so 3,600 plus 840 divided by the total revenue for both of these, 4,140 plus 960. So around 87%. Let's just format this as a percentage. So 87.06%, right? But we're not done. After that, we need to calculate our budgeted profit for the month, because remember, that's the second part of the requirement. And for that, we can use our numbers here. Contribution, we've already calculated. Revenue, variable cost, we can just start by taking the total contribution and then deducting the fixed cost. Oh, we need to be careful though, because this calculation we've done is for a day, right? But the budgeted profit is for a month. So let's just adjust our calculation over here to make it for a full month. It shouldn't have any impact on the overall weighted average CS ratio because we just multiply both numbers by 30. So this should become this, and we'll multiply this by 30 as well. Be careful with the brackets because we're multiplying the whole thing by 30. Yeah, so it's still around 87%. But now we can use these numbers, the total contribution, etc., to make our life much easier and our calculation much easier. Let's just format this. Okay. So we'll have our total contribution for the month, which will simply be the sum of the contribution for the gym plus the contribution for the creche minus our fixed cost. Remember, the fixed cost for the gym were, excluding the cafe, 48,000, and the fixed cost for the creche, you write down here, are 8,000 per month. So the total profit for the month should be 77,200. Let's just format this. Okay. Oops, not currency. Number. Okay, so that should cover all of our requirement. Calculate the budgeted weighted average CS ratio, done, and the budgeted profit for the month, done as well. So that leaves us with the last part, or the last requirement. So again, you can see why the students were struggling with time management, because there's just so many different requirements and it's easy to get bogged down on a single requirement. But just look at the marks, right? Always be aware of the marks that you're doing, that for the part that you're doing. It's a 6-mark question. 1.8 minutes per mark, that means you shouldn't be taking more than about 11 minutes for this part. So if you're taking more time, just know that you need to wrap up and move on. Remember, it's better to have a decent answer for a part and complete all the parts rather than having a perfect answer for some parts and leaving some of the parts blank because you ran out of time. So the last part says advise health nuts. Advise, meaning we need to offer our opinion on something, considering both financial and non-financial factors. So we need to perform analysis from a financial and non-financial standpoint, whether it should replace the cafe with a creche, and whether the calculations in part C provide enough information to make such a decision, for 6 marks. This is our analysis part, but we need to give some advice. So one, we should perform an analysis from a financial and non-financial standpoint on whether the cafe should be replaced by the creche. So we can use some of our numbers in our calculation here, and we need to suggest whether these numbers are enough to make such a decision. Well, off the get-go, we have the total profit here for the gym and the creche, but we didn't calculate it for the gym and the cafe, right, in part C. And I don't think we calculated the total profit in part A for that either. So the numbers don't seem to be enough off the get-go, but let's analyze further. That does mean that considering both financial and non-financial factors, we can consider the profit of the gym and the cafe and compare it to the profit of $77,200 which the gym and the creche were making, right, to have a similar comparison. So we can say, we can just copy this part over here, and we can mention that this is the budgeted profit for gym and creche, and this calculation down here is going to be for the gym and cafe, right? This will just help the examiner understand why we're performing the calculation again. So this time, total contribution, again, we don't need to perform the calculation in detail because we already calculated the contribution more or less in our first part. All we need to do is take the contribution per customer multiplied by the budgeted number of customers, and we need to do this for both the gym and the cafe. So contribution per customer multiplied by the budgeted number of customers, not break-even number of customers. Please don't make that mistake, right? So our total contribution will be this much. Fixed cost, again, we already have that above, negative, and we'll just add the fixed cost above. We have 48,000 plus 36,000. So whenever you have the numbers already added, just link the cells together, right, rather than having to type them over and over again, because if you type them over and over again, it's easy to make a typo, it's easy to make a mistake in entering the number, and then your calculation might end up wrong. So in the case of the gym and the cafe, based on our calculation, our total profit ends up being $33,263, which is far lower than the profit with the gym and the creche. So we can start by saying, right from the start, we can see that the profit with the cafe is only $33,263, right? This is much lower than the projected profit with the creche of $77,200. So that's the financial side of the story. However, we also need to consider the non-financial factors. Now, why did I just stop for the financial part of the story right there? Because it's just for 6 marks, right? Think about it. We're going to talk about the financial factors, the non-financial factors, and then whether the calculation provided enough information. If we say 2 marks for each of these 3 things, an estimate, right? We should be making 2 points for each. For the financial part, we've calculated the profit, there's a mark there, and we've analyzed it, right? So there's 2 marks done for the financial side. That's why we're moving on to non-financial factors. What can we say for non-financial factors? Well, remember that if the creche opens, the cafe closes down. And it is possible that people, when they go to the gym, that they want to eat and have a convenient place nearby from which to eat. So customers who come for the cafe might be driven away by the fact that the cafe is no longer there. At the same time, the creche will attract new customers as well, but we need to consider that fact. It might be unreasonable to assume that no customers will leave if the cafe closes down, while the creche might attract new customers. The shutdown of the cafe so the shutdown of the cafe can also result in the loss of customers. So that's one thing we need to consider. Furthermore, what else can we talk about? Well, the creche is for children, and we can say that it's just a general rule of thumb when it comes to businesses. Like, you have restaurants, you have family restaurants, and you have other restaurants. Family restaurants are more child friendly so that they can accommodate families with children and everything, right? But at the same time, they might not be as attractive to people who don't have families or don't have children. And the same thing could apply here. There will be certain people who go to the gym who don't have families or children, and when children come into the gym, the creche and everything, it might become more noisy, it might become more messy, so it might dissuade certain people without children from attending that gym. They might prefer a gym where there aren't any children running around, right? Just an assumption, but we could mention that point as well. So we can say that it is also possible that the creche might result in other customers being dissuaded from attending this gym, given that the children in the creche might be too noisy. Right? It's not an overly strong point, but it is a valid one. Like, if you've ever been on a flight sitting next to a crying child, you'll know what this means, right? And it is true, and businesses do consider things like this. Anyway, apart from that, what was the last part? Does the calculation give us enough to go off of? So no, because one, we had to calculate the profit separately, and it doesn't consider all of these factors. So the calculation in part C does not consider these factors, nor did it include a calculation for the profit for the gym and cafe to compare against. Therefore, it was not sufficient on its own to make such a decision. And we need to give our final advice. So we can say that first we need to consider any lost potential customers and their impact on the profit before making a final decision. It is advisable that Health Nuts performs a more detailed analysis where it considers any potential loss of customers due to the reason cited above, in their profit calculations before making a final decision on whether or not to close the cafe and open a fresh. So that is enough for basically our answer. Another point we could have mentioned for non-financial analysis is just because of the change and them starting to accommodate for people with children, that demographic is usually a bit older. So their customer demographic might change, and that based on that, the spending habits of their customers might change as well. They might have to rebrand and so on, right? Usually younger people don't have children, older people have children. So they might need to consider that. Again, this is just another point off the top of my head that we could mention, but we don't have to because we've got sufficient points over here. Okay, so that wraps up our answer. So hopefully this gives you a better idea on how to structure your answer for the calculations. Just note down the formulas, what you need to calculate the whatever they ask for in the requirement, and fill out the numbers there. Make whatever the requirement asks for bold. So we didn't do that over here in part A. Make the parts they ask for in the requirement bold so that the marker can immediately see them and check them. And yeah, just make sure that you hit all the requirements and that you don't spend too much time bogged down on any particular part. So hopefully this helps you guys out for your answers in the exam, and I'll see you guys next time.